Hey guys, it's Mark from Migraine Professional. This video, we are going to be talking about the 3 sins of hemiplegic migraines. Now, hemiplegic migraines are a kind of migraine that is probably one of the scariest kinds, one of the most frightening and severe types of migraines that you can have. Now, hemiplegic migraines, we can break down the word hemiplegic into hemi, meaning half, and plegic, meaning paralyzed. Hemiplegic migraines are those migraines that paralyze half of your body. So these migraines will often feel like a stroke. They will come with stroke-like symptoms, but the difference is that these stroke-like symptoms will almost always be completely reversible. So they'll come on, half of your body will feel paralyzed, and then as it leaves, the paralysis will undo itself, and then you'll have motor function again and sensation. So what we really want to understand is that there's 2 main types of hemiplegic migraines. There's familial hemiplegic migraines and there's sporadic hemiplegic migraines. These are basically just differentiating if it's kind of been passed down through your family and there's a known connection. So let's say if your mom or your grandma had hemiplegic migraines, then you would be diagnosed as familial hemiplegic migraines, whereas if there was no connection to your family, then it would be sporadic hemiplegic migraines. They're really general, broad categories. So let's get into it. The first of these 3 sins is, of course, at the very top of the chain is inflammation. And inflammation in the brain, we're thinking neuroinflammation. So neuroinflammation is inflammation around the neurons, the brain cells. It has to do with the glial cells, which support neurons, and are actually, the glial cells are part of the immune system. So there's immune dysregulation here, and this is leading to breakdown and sort of inflammation in the neurons. Now, inflammation is huge. It is implicated in every disease we know of, and its cousin or its brother even, oxidation, goes right along with it. So there are a number of different factors, and inflammation, what we want to understand is that inflammation is a natural reaction by the body. The body creates inflammation so that it can resolve something. So if you get cut, it creates inflammation so that it can seal that cut and seal that wound, and then it can heal it. That is good because it repairs the wound is sealed, and then the inflammation stops. Now, in chronic inflammation, when this inflammation or the cause of that inflammation, we always want to look at the cause. When the cause of that inflammation is not dealt with, when the cause of it has become chronic, then the inflammation becomes chronic, and then we run into problems. So acute inflammation, like the wound, that's no big deal. That's an everyday thing. That's good for us. That's healthy. Chronic inflammation is not so healthy. Chronic inflammation is this battle between the cause of whatever is going on that is creating dysfunction in the organ or the system of the body, and the inflammation that and the immune system's sort of effort with inflammation to repair whatever is being damaged, whatever physiological damage is going on in the body. So we want to do the best we can, always, like I always talk about, to address that underlying cause, whatever that underlying cause is. You want to look at the whole person. You want to understand what is going on. Look at all of the different factors that are going on. Do some deeper testing, not just a simple MRI or CAT scan that often doesn't tell us enough. It doesn't tell us about the whole body. It might just be looking at the brain, and even still, our sort of testing and our testing abilities aren't that advanced yet. So we want to use as many tests as we can and as much of a holistic approach to addressing our body and sources of inflammation as possible. So we want to address those underlying causes, and then we want to directly address that inflammation. So there's many substances, there's anti-inflammatory diets, there's anti-inflammatory techniques like making sure you're getting enough sleep so your brain can repair and detoxify, making sure you're getting proper sleep, making sure you're getting enough hydration so that your body is clearing out waste that can cause inflammation. All of these different things are supportive and they're generally cooling. They're generally cooling to the body, where inflammation is a very hot and yang activity. The things that kind of counter that hot yang, if we're thinking of traditional Chinese medicine, yang. On the other side of that is the yin, the cooling, the cold, the dark, the soothing, the energy building techniques and tools and resources and supplements and diets that help our body build itself up and that don't keep that process of inflammation and whatever is creating that inflammation going. Now, the next one is we want to understand excitation. So whenever we think of migraines, we want to think of excitation of the neurons. These neurons, they're getting excited, and if they cannot sort of sustain themselves, then they start to break down. So in a normal neuron, it's sitting, it always has a little bit of activity going on in it. And then when it's time for it to fire and send a message, send a thought, it excites. The amount of energy in it rises very rapidly. It shoots the message through to the next neuron, and then the level of excitation comes back down. That's a healthy neuron, that's a healthy response. Now, what begins happening as a neuron gets more and more unhealthy because of factors that I'll talk about in a second, as it gets more and more unhealthy, it starts to increase its level of activity because it's trying to compensate for all this stress that's going on in it. It starts to raise its level of activity and it gets very close to that point where it's supposed to fire. And so then it gets kind of trigger happy. It gets very, very sensitive. And then any little thing, like we know the hypersensitive migraine brain, any little thing can trigger it and set it off. And so if it doesn't have the resources to then rebound and calm down and cool off, then we start getting a problem. We can start to develop excitotoxicity, which is excitation leading to toxicity and cell death. That's the last thing we want. So there's a couple of pieces that we really want to consider when we are thinking of excitation in our brain and in our neurons. First of all, we want to understand that calcium entering into the cell. Calcium is a normal part of cellular metabolism. It's an everyday thing. We need it for our ion channels, sodium, potassium, and calcium. But when too much calcium enters the cell can get excited. So we want to make sure we're regulating our thyroid function. We're getting enough bioavailable calcium. We're getting the nutrients that help sort of regulate calcium within and out of the cell. Then we want to understand glutamate. So glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It's used throughout the brain. It's a normal part. The closest kind of connection to glutamate that we can make in our everyday life is MSG, monosodium glutamate. MSG is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So that's why a lot of people will be triggered by MSG. But glutamate in itself in the brain is a good thing. We absolutely need it for everyday functioning. It's what helps excite that cell to send that message. Now, when we get too much glutamate because of an immune response, because of inflammation, because of oxidation, we know oxidation is the one kind of connecting migraine trigger behind all migraines, then glutamate levels get out of hand and then we run into problems. Then we can look at estrogen. We want to be careful with estrogen. Estrogen is it's a very proliferative hormone. It's very vasodilating and it can get out of hand very easily. We want estrogen. Estrogen is good, but then again, just like the other ones, it can get out of balance. It can get out of hand, especially with hormonal migraines. We want to make sure that we're regulating our estrogen. We're not taking extra estrogen that could be sending us into these triggers and triggering us. Then, of course, hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. We want to understand that fuel is what keeps our neurons functioning properly and keeps them from running into so many problems that it starts getting closer and closer to that threshold of excitation. So we want to make sure we're balancing our blood sugar. We are working every single day, every meal, every drink, every time we go to bed. We are either helping our blood sugar or making it worse. And then hydration, of course, we want to make sure that we're not only hydrating regularly, but we're hydrating with proper minerals that put hydration into our cells, and that we are kind of staying hydrated the whole day. We know that we just want to make sure that we're using the right minerals. Then mitochondrial function, when we think of the cell not having enough energy and being under stress, we think of mitochondria. So mitochondria are these little, they're almost like bacteria. At one point in our evolution, they actually were bacteria, but our cells took them in and they sort of developed a symbiotic relationship. So these mitochondria, they create energy for our cells. So we want to make sure that we are doing things that support our mitochondria. Again, like exercise, like sleeping properly, like eating whole foods, eating organic foods, eating a proper blood sugar balance of foods. These all support our mitochondria, making sure that we're exposing ourselves to cold and the elements in different environments so that our body has to kind of adapt and create more mitochondria. This is why exercise is so powerful. And then, of course, oxygen and CO2 capacity. So between oxygen and CO2, we need both of them. Some people like to think of CO2 as a waste product, but we need a certain amount of carbon dioxide, CO2, to actually function properly. So if we start hyperventilating, we drain all the carbon dioxide from our body, and then oxygen can't get into the cell. So we always want to kind of maintain that balance, and that's why when we're meditating, when we're breathing, we are doing an equal inhale and exhale, so that we are giving our body a chance to build up oxygen and then a chance to build up carbon dioxide. So it's kind of between these. And as you can tell, all of these are kind of, they're absolutely normal and critical to our normal functioning. But then when they get out of hand, they can create problems. So we always want to look at the underlying cause, what's kind of pushing our system too far, what's pushing our body out of rhythm, out of sync, and what's kind of creating the inflammation that's creating more stress in the body than it can handle, more allostatic load. And then, of course, we have circulation and ischemia. So ischemia is thought of in stroke, where your blood supply is cut off to the brain can't breathe, and then it starts to die off. But ischemia happens sort of much earlier, where our brain cannot take in that oxygen. It cannot use this oxygen. So whether you're anemic, you have some kind of red blood cell problems, you have B12 issues, you have iron issues, or you have circulation issues. I mean, again, you want to understand that if your hands and feet are cold, not only might your metabolism might be down-regulated because of your thyroid, so you want to look at your thyroid function, but if your circulation is off, then and blood flow isn't getting to your hands and feet, then how is blood flow getting to your gut and maintaining all of the different bacteria in your gut? How is that circulation getting into your brain and maintaining the functioning of your brain, of your and sort of feeding enough oxygen to your brain? Because at the end of the day, oxygen is the kind of the limiting factor in your brain's metabolism, in the ability of your neurons to create energy and work and function is oxygen. So you want to make sure that you're breathing properly, and then that circulation is getting to where it needs to go. So if your hands and feet are always cold, that's a big sign. You want to fix up your metabolism. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And so I'm going to link to an article in the description where we kind of outline all of these different factors that are going on with hemiplegic migraines. And so let me know in the comments below, what have you found works for your hemiplegic migraines? Thanks. Hey, it's Mark from migraineprofessional.com. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe in the bottom left corner. And if you want to learn more about migraines and headaches than you've ever known before, and understand what causes them, what creates them, and what you can do about them, make sure to go to migraineprofessional.com. Thanks.